Good morning. We begin today's daf Yud Aleph in Maseches Kiddushin, 11 in Maseches Kiddushin. We begin by thanking our sponsors. Thank the sponsors, the Talmud Torah sponsors, for the month of Elul. Jerry and Sarah Walaski, in the schus for Refuah Shalema, for Zachariah Dov Ben Parel Shira, Shtad Refuah Shalema Karafayim. We also thank the Tilson and Wolf families of Eretz Yisrael and other devoted Talmidim of our special Rav who are unable to attend the wedding, and wish our Rav and the families much happiness, health, shalom, mazel tov, and shana tova. Thank you so much. Also thank Shendi and Avram Kelman for sponsoring all the shiurim in memory of their beloved parents and the zechus of all those who need a refuah shlema. We thank the sponsors of Talmud Torah for the week, Nancy and David Berkowitz, in celebration of their son Jonathan's recent engagement to Rachel Harris, mazel tov, and the entire Daf Chevra in honor of the 20th anniversary of the Silber family joining Suburban Orthodox. So thank you to all of our sponsors. Today's Daf is Maseches Kiddushin, Daf Yud Aleph 11. We're going to start from Daf Yud Amud Beis. I think that's where we're up to. Daf Yud Amud Beis, a number of lines up from the bottom. Is that correct? Did Rabbi Silber finish till the top? I don't think so, right? Okay, so just let's. What's so funny? Let us just do a quick recap of what we were talking about. The Mishnah gave us three possible options of how a person can be Mikadesh and Isha. And one of those is Bia. The Gemara in yesterday's daf was analyzing what exactly is accomplished with the Bia. Does it make Erusin, or does it actually make Nisuin? Does it finish the process, or is it just the first half of the ritual marriage? That was the Gemara of yesterday. Now the Gemara tried to bring a number of rayas, a number of proofs to this concept from the idea of achilas truma, as from at what point in time it would be permissible for her to begin eating truma. Now the Gemara is going to continue today from Ravina Amar. Ravina, I would say it's about 10 to 12 lines from the bottom. The last word on the line, Ravina Amar. Ravina says, Midoraisa, really, biblically speaking, Mifshat Pshita Da'achla. The truth is, everybody should agree that once she already has erusin, even right away at the beginning, she's allowed to eat truma. There's only the reason why she can't eat truma midrabanan hu dishalachle. The reason why she cannot eat truma is all rabbinic. Hachi shalachle, and this is what he sent him. Said Shemati alecha, I heard about you, Shata Omar Arusa Bas Yisrael Achelas Petruma, Velo Chayshus L'Simpon. I have heard about you that you are allowing an Arusa Bas Yisrael. So you have a girl who's not a Bas Kohen, who gets engaged and marries a Kohen. So I've heard that you permitted an Arusa who got married with simple Eris and Kiddushin, the first half of marriage, to eat Truma, but you're not worried about Simpon. So the Gemara explains that the reason why she would not be able to eat Truma is because of Simpon. What is Simpon? So Simpon, if you look at Rashi tells us, Mishum Simpon, Shema Yimtza Ba Mum V'nimtzu Kedushay Taos. Maybe a person will find some type of deficit, some type of issue with this woman, and he'll say, you know what, forget it, I don't want to get married. And Rashi goes on to explain that the term Simpon, called Davar Hamavatel Davar Karoi Simpon. Anything that invalidates a previous action is called a simpon. Rashi goes on to explain that even a receipt is called a simpon. Why is the receipt called a simpon? Because a person will have a contract. The contract will have some type of legal liability within that contract. And then, after they pay up, so technically paying up the loan invalidates the contract, but paying up is not a proof. The person has to have some kind of receipt. Now, the receipt is the invalidation of the contract. So when you have a bill, an invoice that says you owe, let's say, $1,000, the receipt is the simpon on the invoice. The receipt says that the contract or the invoice is going to be invalid. The same thing is true over here. A person gets married and then discovers after he does Erusin that no, this is not going to work. I wasn't aware of the following problems that this woman had, and therefore he invalidates the Erusin. He reverses the Erusin. He gives her a get. So then what happens is now she's not going to be married, and turns out she's been eating truma the whole time, and Chazal don't want to have a situation where we are reversing the Kiddushin because of a mekach ta'os. He didn't realize that she had certain deficits, certain issues that were going to be a problem. It turns out the whole thing was a mekach ta'os. Now, turns out she was eating truma for no reason. So that's the issue midrabanan as to why she can't eat truma. So midoraisa, she'd be allowed to eat truma. However, midrabanan, because we're worried that maybe he'll reverse the Kiddushin, claiming that the whole thing was a mistake from the beginning. We don't want her eating truma until the deal is consummated. Shalach lei, he said to him, Va'ata iata omer kain. You don't say that. Muchzakani b'cha. I have known, this is known about you, we had this expression on yesterday's staff, Sa'atabaki b'chadrei Torah, that you know all the different secret compartments of the Torah. Lidrosh b'kavachomer atodea. You can't make a kavachomer from another case, and he goes on to explain what's the kavachomer. He says, "Umashivcha kananis." Let's compare it to a shivcha kananis, to a non-Jewish maidservant. She'ein bi'asa machilasa b'truma. If a person goes over to a shivcha kananis and indicates, it's not working, and indicates that he wants to make a purchase of a shivcha kananis. And how does he go about doing that? He has bia with her. Now that's irrelevant. There's no such thing as buying a shivcha kananis with bia. The whole idea of bia is a marital type of relationship. So therefore, if a person has bia with a shivcha kananis, she doesn't get to eat truma, because that's not one of the ways of acquiring a shivcha kananis. But still, kaspa machilasa betruma, a person actually pays money to acquire the shivcha kananis, then yes, she can eat truma. V'lo chashina l'simpon. We're not worried that he's going to back out and say, you know what, forget it. Something's wrong with you. I don't want to have this type of shivcha kananis. Just simply giving money is enough. Zu, a marriage, shebi asa machilasa betruma, the bia, the intimate relationship actually does allow her to eat truma. In odin shekaspa machilasa betruma, wouldn't it be obvious that the monetary transaction should allow her to eat truma? Should not be worried about some type of information coming out that will cause us to reverse the sale. He says, what am I supposed to do? I have what I believe to be a valid kal v'chomer, a logical understanding as to why it should work to allow a woman to eat truma immediately after Kiddushin and not need to wait until Nisuin. However, what am I supposed to do? Chazal told us that Arusa Bas Yisrael cannot eat truma. Top of Yud Aleph Amud Aleph. Ad shetikanis the chuppah, until she actually goes through the chuppah. Why? Mishum de'ula u ben bagbag, because of ula and ben bagbag. What's this? We explained yesterday. Ula is because we don't want her to go back home, because after Erison she goes back home. She goes back to her family. Now, if she's going to go back home, she might get some lunch while she's out on a date with her chassan, and it might be that it's a truma lunch, and she has some leftovers. She goes back home and she says to her family, hey, listen, my chassan bought me this delicious lunch. I'm full. It's not going to be good by tomorrow. Who wants to eat it? Now the problem is she's giving truma to her family members. So it's ula and ben bag as we just explained. Now the Gemara says, however, simple and ba'avadim lesle. It explains the truth is that the whole idea, the comparison, really doesn't make sense, because simpon is something that would cause you to reverse the sale. The Gemara says, so Ben Bagbag explains, simpon ba'avadim lesle. There's no issue. We're not worried about simpon when it comes to slaves. Why? Because what would be some information that would come out that would cause you to reverse the sale? By marriage, we can think of all kinds of things that a person will find out about their spouse, which would say, hey, I didn't know about this while we were dating. I didn't know about this when I gave you the Kiddushin. Now that I'm living with you a little bit more, I have found out some intimate information about you, which is not going to work. This is the deal breaker in our marriage. But Ben Bagbag says, when it comes to avadim, what kind of information can possibly come out that would cause you to reverse the sale? If we're talking about recognizable, obvious problems, hold on. He saw them right away. So if he saw them right away, he found out about them right away. And Rashi says, Hasavar v'kibo. He knows about this. Rashi says that later, but that's the idea. The concept is he knows exactly what he's getting. He bought it anyway, so that's not going to cause him to reverse the sale. If we're talking about private hidden types of blemishes that the Eved might have. What's in his business? They're private. He's a servant. The Gemara says, he's there to do work. What difference does it make to him if in a private place he has some type of mum? It makes no difference. What's the other option? Nimtza ganav kavustis. What are you worried about, that he's a thief or he's a kavustis? Well, so Rashi says kavustis is a gon of nefashos. He's a person who's a kidnapper. Tosfos has a problem with that because of various different places where it indicates that Moshe Rabbeinu was accused of being of a kavustis, and there was absolutely no indication that Moshe Rabbeinu was not stealing people. So therefore, Tosfos says a kavustis is a gambler, somebody who's mesachik bekuvya, someone who plays with dice, and he gambles away his money. So, and just parenthetically, at the end of Tosfos actually puts the two of them together. Tosfos says that the guy started off as a gambler, but then he found himself losing too much money. Once he lost too much money, he had to actually get some money, so he started stealing people for ransom to get money. So he puts both of them together. The bottom line is, what's the problem? You'll find out that this guy that you bought as an Eved is either a thief, or he's gambling, or he's stealing people, he's a kidnapper. If that's something that you're worried about, that he's Higio. The Gemara says, Higio. You bought an Eved. It's not like you went ahead and hired a CEO for your company. These things happen. Most people are selling themselves as an Eved, are not people who are otherwise going to get a job, as an executive in a company. He's selling himself as an Eved. You have to expect that. So my Amrit, what else is left? What other option might have? What else might come out about this person that would want you to reverse the sale? List him Mezuyin. He's an armed robber, so that's actually dangerous. Onichtav l'malchus. Or here you went ahead, you paid money, you invested in this servant because you want him to work for you, and now you find out the guy's on death row. He's about to be put to death by the king. Hanu kala islahu. Those are the kinds of things that people find out about. You should have known about that beforehand. If he was an armed robber, or if he was on death row, these are things you could have found out. Now, again, it happens to be that there's two ways of understanding this. According to Rashi, Hanu kala islahu means the savar of a kibel. Just do some basic research. When you go ahead and buy an Eved, just open up, do a quick Google search on this Eved's name. If it turns out that you see that he was indicted or that he was convicted of some type of capital crime and is going to be put to death, maybe that's just not the right guy to hire as an Eved. Or if you find out that he's an armed robber, again, he's not the right person to hire. According to Tosfos wasn't dealing with Google. So what does it mean, Hanu kala islahu? Tosfos says they're so uncommon. These kinds of things are so uncommon that they would come up, that if they would, there would be some type of rumor about it. And if there's no rumor, the whole thing's so uncommon, so we're not going to say, we're going to be gozer, maybe you're going to go ahead, buy this Eved, give the Eved some truma to eat, and then you're going to reverse it, because of Simpon, you'll find out that the guy is an armed robber, or the guy is going to be put to death soon, so therefore we shouldn't allow all avadim. Tosfos says the whole thing is so uncommon that we're not going to worry about it, and therefore there's a very simple difference between an Eved and an Isha. An Eved, as soon as you buy the Eved, you could allow the Eved to go, or Shifcha Kananis, to eat Truma, because we have nothing to worry about. We really have no reason to assume that later on the deal is going to be reversed. However, when it comes to an Isha, hold on, that's a much more significant kind of relationship. This is building a family together. This is they become one person. That's something much more significant. Yes, private mumin can come out. Private blemishes can actually make a difference. And all types of character deficiencies can make a difference. In those cases, we don't want to allow her to eat truma until we know for sure that this is going to go through, and therefore we make her wait until after chuppah. And the Gemara says, Mechti, whether we're going according to Ravina, or we're going according to Ula, Bein Lamar, Lo Achla. She can't eat Truma. So what's the difference? My Beinayu. What's the difference? What the reason is? Where it says Iki Beinayu, the following is the difference. Kibel, three things. Kibel, Masar, V'halach. What does Kibel mean? Says Rashi, Kibel alav esamumin. The person says, listen, I got your full medical records. I know all the problems that you have. Nevertheless, I want to marry you in any case. So in such a case, we're not really going to be worried about Simpon, but backing out of the deal because he knows the full story. However, because of Ula's problem that she'll go back home and feed Truma to her family, that still is a problem because they'll still be dating between Erison and Nisuin, and he might give her some food and she'll take it home and feed it to her family. What is Masar? Masar, both Masar and Halach are different examples, but they're examples of when the girl was given over by her father, either by his shluchim or by the husband's shluchim, so she's not yet there. In those cases, we have nothing to worry about when it comes to her giving the food to her siblings, because she's not with her siblings. However, we are worried that maybe he'll want to back out. So those are cases where it makes a difference. But it's true, under most normal circumstances, the halacha would be the same. The Gemara now continues. In our Mishnah it said, Hisha niktis bekesef b'shtar Rabbi, and then the Mishnah asked how much money is needed in order to validate the Kiddushin. And we saw it says Beishami Omrim, in the third line of the Mishnah, Daf Bezim and Aleph, it says Bedinar, B'Shava Dinar, Beis Hillel Omer B'Pruta, B'Shava Pruta. It's machlokes between Beishamai and Beis Hillel whether a Pruta is necessary in order to accomplish a Kiddushin, or a person has to actually give a dinar, which is about 8 times its value. The Gemara wants to know now, my Bekesef Beishamai Omer Bedinar. The Gemara asks, my Taimayo de Beishamai. What is the reason that Beishamai requires a full dinar in order for Kiddushin to be accomplished? Now it's important to understand that the Tosfos explains this very clearly. The Gemara's understanding that according to Beis Shammai, anything less than a dinar will not work. That means even if she says, yes, I'm willing to accept it, it's not going to work. Because less than a dinar does not have the validation of kesef. It's not called money if it's less than a dinar. Gemara wants to know why not. Amar Zera says, why? Shekain isha makpedes al atzma. Women don't want to allow themselves to be mukadeshes, to become married with simply one pruta. Therefore, it's such a small amount of money, and therefore they're not willing to accept Kiddushin for anything less than a dinar. So Gemara says, all right, that seems to make sense. The problem is, let's just finish the line. Women are makpid, they're careful about themselves. They would never marry themselves off for less than a dinar. So he said, okay, if that's what you're saying, then Amar le Abaya, Elamayata, if that's the case, can go in Bante de Rabbi Yanai. If you're telling me that the reason is a subjective reason, because women simply are not willing to accept less than a dinar, what if you find people who are really makbid about themselves, like the daughters of Rabbi Yanai, the captain Anavshayu, they were really makbid about themselves. V'lo mikachi b'pachas mitarkava dedinri. They would not accept Kiddushin unless they get 3 kavin of dinarim. So they said, listen, we're a chash of a family. We're not just willing to get married to anybody. We're not willing to accept Kiddushin from anybody. We're not even willing to accept just a simple amount of money. The person who we're going to be willing to marry must come up with 3 kavin of dinarim. So now, hachinami, di pashta yada v'kibla chad zuzah mi'echad, hachinami levi Kiddushin. What happens if one of them said, you know what, I really like this guy, but he's poor, he doesn't have any money. And she stretches out her hand, and she says, you know what, for you, it's worth it, give me 1 dinar. Would that not work? Now, Tosfos explains this, that if we're dealing with a subjective amount of money, and you're telling me that anything less than that subjective amount of money is not considered money, then at what point does this stop? So the Gemara answers, Ki kamina de kitcha balayla. Oh, sorry. Amar le, he responded, he said, Pashta yada v'kibala kamina. Of course. I'm not talking about a case where the bride stretched out her hand and said, you know what, I'm willing to accept a much lower amount of money from you because it's worth it. Ki kamina de kitcha balayla, inami de shavish liach. The only case I'm talking about is when she can't see the money, it's at night. Now, parenthetically, if it's at night, it has to be bright enough that the Eidim can recognize the faces of the Chassan and the Kala, because otherwise you don't have any Eidim. Eidim are critically important for a Kiddushin, but it's too dark to recognize the actual coin that's being transferred. Or the Shavi Shliach, she or he appointed a Shliach to go ahead and do the Kiddushin. In that case, she doesn't see it. So under those circumstances, when she's not there, that's when we're saying it has to be a dinar. If you look at Tosfos basically understands the Gemara as the issue over here is the concept called Nasata Dvarecha L'Shiurim. Because according to Beis Hillel, things seem to be much more straightforward, which is, if you would like to get married with money, or something that's equivalent to money, it has to hold the value of what would be called money. Now, money could be a lot of money, or could be a little bit of money. But as long as it has some type of value of money, that's good enough. According to Beis Shammai, it seems like the issue over here is, we're not just dealing with what the definition of money is. We're dealing with how much is enough money. How much is enough money that a person would be willing to get married with that amount of money? Now, with that being the case, Tosfos says the Gemara is bothered by the concept of Nasata L'Dvarecha L'Shiurim. If you're dealing with a poor person, maybe a prutu would be enough. If you're dealing with a really wealthy person, you'd have to have 3 kavan of dinar. If you're dealing with a middle-class person, maybe it has to be 1 dinar, 2 dinar, 3 dinar. At what point do we say that this is ridiculous? How can we have a Mishnah which basically says that Masadar Kiddushin, in addition to determining that the shidduch is a viable halachic shidduch, now has to analyze and evaluate the financial standings of the kala and determine exactly how much money would be an appropriate amount of money. This is just becoming ridiculous. And then it turns out the Rav is Masadar Kiddushin on Sunday at 1 chasana, and it says, you know what, it's enough to have 1 dinar. And on Monday, he says, you know what? It has to be 2 dinar. And he only gave 1 dinar, so 1 Kiddushin is valid. It just becomes so complicated and overwhelming to figure out what halachic Kiddushin is. So according to Tosfos, Mushani Pashta Yad Lo Kamina. So in other words, Tosfos says, of course, everyone's going to agree that if she stretches out her hand and accepts any amount of money, it's always going to be fine. However, Beis Shammai was giving a blanket statement of what would be considered to be a normal amount of money that everybody would accept, and says Beis Shammai that's going to have to be a dinar. Rav Yosef says, Tamar de Beis Shammai to Rav Yehuda. The reason of Beis Shammai is like Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda Mervasi, like Rav Yehuda said in Mervasi, which is the Rav Yehuda Mervasi, called Kesef Amr B'Torah. Anytime the Torah uses the terminology of Kesef, it's Kesef Tsuri. The Shal Devarayim, every time Chachamim use the terminology of Kesef, it's Kesef Medina. It is the currency of that particular place. Let me just explain. Rashi explains this, but just very clearly, Tsuri was a place that only minted coins out of pure silver. So even their lowest coin, which was called a ma, was made out of pure silver. There are other places that minted coins which had mixtures of copper in them. When you mix copper, the value of the coin obviously goes down. So now, when we're dealing with Kesef Tsuri, it's always going to be pure silver, and that's going to hold a much higher value. So says Rav Asi, or Rav Yehuda, the name of Rav Asi, the reason for Beis Shammai, why he says it has to be a dinar, is because in general currency, a typical dinar will be worth a ma, or a smaller coin, in Tsuri. So in order to have a typical coin of other locations be the same value as a coin in Tsuri, would have to be a dinar of typical currency. So, in other words, he essentially really agrees that it could be the lowest currency. It just has to be the lowest currency of Tsuri, and Tsuri's currency were actually minted of real silver. So therefore, he just was saying, in order to level out that all other currency will be equal to Kesef Tsuri, it's going to have to be a dinar worth. So that's Beis Shammai's opinion. Okay, the Gemara says, the Gemara is going to analyze this. Gufa, 3 lines from the bottom. Amar v'Yehuda Mervasi, kol kesef amar b'Torah. Anytime the Torah uses the terminology of kesef, it's kesef tsuri. It refers to the kesef of tsuri, which is made out of silver. Shal dvarayim, kesef medina. Whenever chachamim require a monetary transaction, it refers just to the local currency. Gemara says, oh really? But klalahu, is that actually a klal? It's in the top of Yud Aleph on the base. V'ha taina, hare taina, when it comes to a taina, what's taina? Taina refers to the concept of modav miktas hataina. As we continue into the Nezikin Masechtas very soon, we're going to get back into the concept of modav miktas, which means when a person goes to somebody else and says to him, you owe me the following amount of money, the person admits to a partial amount of that loan, the halacha is he has to take an oath for the rest of it. So, for example, typical example is a person says, you owe me $100. The person says, what? I don't owe you $100. I owe you $50. In such a case, the halacha is he pays the $50 and he takes an oath that he does not owe the other $50. If a person is kofar akol, if a person denies the entire loan, so Reuven goes to Shimon and says, Shimon, you owe me $100. And Shimon says, Reuven, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't owe you any money. The halacha is, technically speaking, he's off the hook. Why? Because the most michavero, all of Aryeh. If you like to extract money from somebody, you have to prove it. The difference is when you admit to half of the loan, in such a case, you have to take an oath. You've essentially validated the loan by admitting to it. It's just a dispute about how much money it is. Now, when we talk about this, when it says in the pasuk, Yitin ish el re'eo kesef o kelim lishmar, person deposits his possessions with another person to guard it for him. And the end of that pasuk is where he denies half of the deposit. He says, here's your stuff. And it turns out he's only giving back half. So now it says in the Mishnah, Tanan, Shvuas HaDayanim, when the judges require a person to take an oath, Hataina, the taina has to be Shtei Kesef, 2 silver coins. The Hahodah, and what he admits to is Shava Pruta, is worth only a Pruta. So now, if you look in the middle of the Rashi, which is 5 lines in the skinny lines, Mikal Makum, nevertheless, Midikatani Kesef, from the fact that it says Kesef, Shmamina Kra Lav Dafka. The pasuk didn't give a specific amount of money. And Lav Dafka Kesef Kamar, Elama Mona Ba'ama, any amount of money. The pasuk didn't say it has to be a specific amount of money. V'kivin shlo pirish kama lo masru akasav al chachamim. The chachamim gave the right to the chachamim to determine how much money must be in this case. So again, if Rabbi Yehuda and Rav Asi was telling us that every time it says kesef, like in this case, kitin ish el re'eo kesef, the person will deposit with his friend kesef, it automatically refers to a silver coin. And the problem is, the pasuk did not mean a silver coin in this case. The Gemara says, Hasam dumi de kalim. In that case, it has to be similar to kalim. Ma kalim shnayim, av kesef shnayim. It has to be 2, just like kalim is a plural terminology. It has to be 2, so it's 2 coins. Uma kesef davar chashav, just like when kesef goes the flip side also. Kesef is always something which is of value. Av kalim davar chashav. When you're talking about a person who's denying how many kalim he's watching, it has to be something which is actually of value. Rashi says it can't just be 2 needles. Okay, so that pasuk is not necessarily a problem. Okay, Vari Meiser. However, when it comes to Meiser, the pasuk also uses the terminology of kesef. Chsiv bitzar toa kesef. He will bundle up the kesef biyadecha on his hand. V'tanan, and we learned haporet sela, a person who wants to switch a sela mimos Meiser sheni. He wants to switch out a sela which is copper. So again, how is it that he has any Meiser? What is Meiser Sheni? A person who lives outside of Yerushalayim, so he has Meiser Sheni, and what he does is he redeems the Meiser Sheni onto money, and then he sends the money to Yerushalayim. Now, a person has some copper coins of Meiser Sheni that he wants to switch. Hold on. How do you have copper coins of Meiser Sheni? The pasuk says it has to be kesef, so it should always have to be silver. So you see clearly that kesef doesn't always mean silver. The Gemara says kesef ha kesef riva. In that case, there's an extra word of ha kesef, which makes it different and includes all kinds of kesef. All right, Aryeh hektish. Another place where the Torah uses the terminology of kesef. The chsiv, it says in the pasuk, v'nosana kesef v'kamlo. They're talking about redeeming the consecrated materials. It says v'nosana hakesef v'kamlo. He'll give the money; it will belong to him. V'amar Shmuel, and Shmuel said, hektish shava mana shechilal shava putu mechulal. So again, we're seeing that it's not necessarily going to be silver coins because he's talking about it's a shava pruta. If it's a shava pruta, that's obviously can't be less than kesef tsuri. The Gemara says hasamnami kesef yalavu meiser. We learned it out from meiser that it could be any type of coin and not necessarily a silver coin. Aryeh Kiddushin isha. So let's get back to our case. Kiddushin isha l'chsiv. For it says in the pasuk yikach ish isha u'ba'ala. Person will yikach. He will take for himself an isha u'ba'ala and he will be intimate with her. Now we learned all the way at the beginning of the Masechta that the way that we know that kesef actually works, that money actually works to accomplish a kiddushin. The Gomer kicha mistei afron. We learn gzeira shava of kicha. The word says ki yikach isha here, and it says asati kesef sadakach mimeni. It has the word kach in both places. Utanan, and we learned Beis Hillel omrim bipruta ub'shava pruta. Beis Hillel says how much money is necessary a pruta. So now hold on a second. Let's just analyze this. Rav Asi, you want to be halachically correct, right? Now you're telling me that every time the pasuk says you can use kesef, it refers to kesef tsuri, which is a dinar. That would mean that if the pasuk allows you to be mekadesh in isha with kesef, it would have to be a dinar. That means lema nema Rav Asi damar k'Beis Shammai. Now it turns out Rav Asi is going to have to align himself with the opinion of Beis Shammai. We don't pass him like Beis Shammai. So now Rav Asi, do you realize, says the Gemara, if you're going to make this statement that every single time the pasuk allows kesef to be used, that it means a dinar or a kesef tsuri, you understand you're passing like Beis Shammai. You're going to be halachically incorrect. The Gemara says, hold on a second. We don't want that to happen. We don't want Rav Asi to be halachically incorrect like Beis Shammai. If Rav Asi said anything about the value of money, this is what he said. Amar v'Yehuda Rav Asi, Kol kesef kotzov ha'amar b'Torah. Anytime you have a set amount of money in the Torah, it's kesef tsuri. It refers to kesef tsuri. Shal divrayim kesef medina. If you have a specific amount of money in a rabbinic matter, then it's going to be just the local currency. So the Gemara changes it. It's not every time it says kesef. Anytime there's a specific amount of kesef. We're going to see a number of examples of specific amounts of money that the Torah gives. Gemara says, hold on. If that's all you're saying, then my kamashmala. What are you teaching me? Everybody agrees to that. Tanina, it's a Mishnah. What does the Mishnah say? Chamesh sloim shel ben, the 5 sloim of a pidyon aben, or shloshim shel eved, the 30 shekel kesef that needs to be paid if someone's ox kills someone's eved, chamishim shel onus shel mafata, the 50 shekel that a person needs to pay if a person is ma'anes, if a person rapes, or is mafata, or seduces a girl, or meya shel motzi shemra, the 100 that needs to be paid if a person spreads a false rumor about his wife that she was not a basul when they got married, kulam b'shekel HaKodesh. All of those are referring to shekel HaKodesh, which is silver, the manatsuri, in silver coins. So, what are you telling me, Rav Asi? B'shal divrayim kesef medina itzricha leil. The Gemara says Rav Asi really was not pointing out the halacha with regard to the specific amounts of money that the Torah tells us. Rav Asi really says everybody agrees with my statement. Everybody agrees that when the Torah gives you a specific amount of money that needs to be paid, like in the above mentioned cases, all those cases, the money that needs to be given are silver coins. So when it says that a person needs to pay 5 slayim for a pidyon aben, everybody agrees those 5 slayim need to be silver coins. What's my chiddush, says Rav Asi? My chiddush just is that when it's rabbinic in nature, even if they give a specific amount of money, it could just be the local currency and does not have to be actual silver coins. Why did I say that? The Lotnan, because that was not actually specified. Tanya, for it says in the Brisa, Hatokea lechavero. A person is tokea for his friend. So it means one of two things. Either he goes into his ear and blows in his ear very hard, or he actually whacks him. In any of these cases, he's not actually suffering any physical damage, but it's hardly embarrassing. The halach is he has to pay him. No stin l'sela. He has to give him a sela of compensation for the public humiliation. And in those cases, but that's drabanan. Below tema my sela arba zuzi. We're not going to say that a sela that he has to give is 4 zuz. Ala my sela palga de zuzah. He has to give him a half a zuz. Why davidi inish? The karla palga de zuzah is stira. Many people call the half of a zuz an astira. So the Gemara is saying that that's Asi's Kiddush. When it comes to rabbinic payments of a sela or anything like that, it's going to be based off the local currency, since most people in that locale will call an istira, a pagad zuzah, they call it a half a zuz an istira. That's enough. And that's all he has to give. Getting back to Beis Shammai, we've analyzed Beis Shammai, why Beis Shammai says that you have to pay a dinar in order to accomplish this Kiddushin. So we started at the beginning with Rav Zera, who said that women are just not willing to accept less. It got a little bit difficult because it became very subjective. And then we had the concept of Rav Asi, where we said Rav Asi says anytime it says kesef, it always refers to kesef tzuri. Now, the Gemara is going to say, Shimon Melakish Omar, Tamar the Beis Shammai Kiddushin. Shimon Melakish says, the reason why Beis Shammai requires a dinar to be paid for the Kiddushin to be accomplished is like Chizkiah. The Amar Chizkiah, Amar Krav Behefta. The Pasuk says when it comes to an Amma Ivriya who wants to redeem herself, Melamed Shemiga'aras Mipidyoina V'yoitza. That teaches us that we subtract from her pidyon, from her redemption, she goes out. What does this mean? Just to explain. The Gemara later on is going to explain how it is that a person can actually acquire an Eved, how a person can acquire an Amma. And just like it talks about how a woman can release herself from a marriage with a get or Misa Sabal, so we talk about how an Eved or an Amma could release themselves from their contractual servitude that they have there. What do they do? One of them is called Gira and Kesef. What does Gira and Kesef means? It means that they redeem themselves from the purchase. Now, under normal circumstances, you might say, if the Eved, if the Adon, if the master bought the Eved, let's just take an easy to work with number for $6,000. Now, the Eved wants to go ahead and redeem himself. So you'd say, hey, listen, if you can pay back the $6,000, you're a free man. Go ahead, you're free to go. Now, the pasuk actually teaches us from Behefta, which is actually by an Amma Ivriya, that if she wants to redeem herself, the Adon, the master, actually has to take part in assisting her to go. What does that mean? That means that he prorates the amount of time that she was working for him, and he subtracts that from the sale. So let's say in the 3rd year of her servitude, she says, you know what, I've had enough of this. I've earned enough money. I want to go. So now I worked for 3 years. The purchase price was $6,000. So now I worked for 3. I'd like to buy myself back. The Hefta teaches us the Adon, the master, should subtract the $3,000 that he already gained, and now she's able to redeem herself for $3,000. So now, with that being the case, Melamed Shemigaras Mipidyona. That teaches us that we subtract from the amount that she needs for her redemption. V'yotzim, she goes out. Now, Iyam Reper Shlama, if you're going to tell me that everything is good, the Yahiv dinar, that she was purchased for a dinar, then Hainu de Migareya, V'azla, Ad Pruta. You can take a dinar and you continue to divide it. A dinar has within it enough money to divide it for enough prutas for each year. El Iyam Reper Pruta, if it's correct that you could buy this Amma just for simply 1 pruta, Mimigareya, is it even possible to continue to divide a pruta? There's no way to divide a pruta. There's nothing worth less than a pruta. So how is it that the Adon could go ahead and assist her in redeeming herself by prorating it and dividing the amount that he purchased her for? If you purchase her for a pruta, there's nothing left to divide. Gemara says, "V'dilma hachi kamar." Maybe this is what it means. Hachi kamar achmana. Heicha di yahav la dinar. If she was purchased for a dinar, tigra ad pruta. She can go ahead and be redeemed by subtracting up until a pruta. However, hechad the yav la pruta, if she was purchased in the first place for a pruta, lo tigra klal. What's he supposed to do? He can't keep subdividing this pruta. In such a case, she would have to pay the full purchase price, which is a pruta, to get herself out. Gemara continues in the top of Yud Vezim and Aleph. Gemara says, lo sal kadaitach. It can't be. It's impossible that would be the halacha. Why? Because duma di giyud. Ma yiyud afagav di iboi miyayed. Vi iboi lo miyayed. Chohecha de lo matzi miyayed. Lo havi zvina zvini. What does this mean? Yiyud is the right. Pasuk tells us that he could, that the adon, the master, has the right to marry off his child to this amma as long as she is with him. So he buys the amma for the 6 years. Halacha is he is allowed to go ahead and marry her. Now, if he doesn't, then he lets her go. If they get married, then she's married. Now, what happens if she was sold in a case where there are relatives? So she's not able to marry the family. Rashi writes this clearly. If you look at the first wide line, the first line of Rashi, just like it said with regard to Yiyud, shenichtav imo asher lo yi'adav v'lamdenu shurashaya adon. We learn from there that the master has the right liyada besoch shnei amahos v'tiyeh mekudashes. She will be during her years of her purchase. She'll be mekudeshes lo. Im amar la hareat miyuedas li v'mashiyesh li alecha ve'ein tzarach kesef acher. He could use that money to actually get married to her. Now, however, if she was sold to krovim, to relatives that she's not allowed to marry, then the yiyud is not going to work. So now, what this teaches us is when an amma sale is made, it needs to be able to have the ability to have all the rights that are due to an amma. So if she's sold to a relative, in a case where she cannot actually marry the person because they're too closely related, in such a case, not only can they not get married, but the whole sale is invalid. Why? Because the sale of an amma has to have the ability to be able to come along with all the rights and privileges that come along with an amma. If, for some halachic reason, like they're related, he can't go ahead and marry her, in such a case, then the sale doesn't work. So the Gemara says it's dumya diyud. The same thing is true with regard to the redemption. If there's no way to go ahead and assist her in subtracting the prorated amount of time that she worked for, then the sale won't even work. So therefore, it's impossible that the sale is going to be valid for less than a pruta. Gemara says, "Hachanami kol hechet lamatzi megareya lohavi zvina zvini." And then the Gemara says, "B'kedusha isha lebeishamai nafkalahu me'ama ivriya mama ama ivriya b'puta lo makna af isha b'puta lo mekacha." The Gemara says it must be now we understand why Beis Shammai says this halacha with regard to Kiddushin. If an Alma Ivriya would never sell herself for less, or I shouldn't say would never, can't sell herself for less than a dinar, because then it's impossible to go ahead and subtract any money from it. So the same thing will be true with regard to Kiddushin Isha. It will never be able to be valid if it's less than a dinar. The Gemara says, hold on. Why are you jumping from a pruta to a dinar? Ve'ema palgud a dinar. Ve'ema shtei prutos. Why are we saying that just because you can't continue to divide a pruta, so that means you jump all the way to a dinar? Maybe it's going to be 2 prutos. In such a case, they could say, you know what? At the 3-year mark, I'll assist you in your redemption. I bought you for 2 prutos. It's 3 years in. You can redeem yourself for 1 pruta. Or maybe palga the dinar, a half of a dinar, which is going to be 4 coins. But ultimately, why are we jumping so high? Who says you have to go all the way to the extreme? Gemara says, "Kivan da apiktim a pruta ukma a dinar." Once we already left the pruta, so then we went ahead to the next valid currency, which was going to be a dinar. Rava Amar, Rava gives one more explanation. Hainu Tamid Beis Shammai. This is the reason why Beis Shammai says that Kiddushin needs to be a dinar and not just a pruta. Shalo Yehu Benos Yisrael Kehefker. We don't want to cheapen the value of Benos Yisrael. Very simple. It doesn't have to be that complicated. Beis Shammai just didn't want. Seems like it's much more midrabanan. If you see Rashi, Kehefker liknos bedavar muat. Rashi says clearly, umidrabanan hu de ka'amri la Beis Shammai. The afki rabbanan l'kedushin hapachus medina. We learned previously. We learned in this Masechta. We learned in Gittin. It came up in almost every Masechta we learned so far that Chazal, when we get married, we say Aryeh mikadeshes likadas Moshe v'Yisrael. We subject our Kiddushin to the guidance of Chazal. Chazal have the right to actually revoke and to reverse what would otherwise be a halachic Kiddushin. Chazal said, we can't, according to Beis Shammai at least, we can't allow Kiddushin to take place in a way where it even gives a message that Benos Yisrael are cheap. Yeah, you can get married for a pruta. So therefore, they up the value to have to be at least a dinar. It's not because less than a dinar is not considered money. Chazal said, we are revoking Kiddushin from anybody who's going to marry a girl for less than a dinar. That's why Beis Shammai says it has to be a dinar, but it's only drabanan. At the end of the day, we don't paskin like Beis Shammai, we paskin like Beis Hillel, but between me and you, the ring that is given under the chuppah, we're actually makbid. It shouldn't be a very expensive ring, because then actually she might think it's worth more than it is, but technically, as long as it's worth a pruta, it's going to be enough. Have a wonderful day. See you all, Mer Hashem, tomorrow.